Hey, how are you doing? This is Brian Shanley, and you were listening to Brian James Shanley Raw. It is my video blog on which I deal with the issues of our time period that confront both the church and the world, and I put forth a little bit of knowledge that might help you to understand the times and to make decisions about what you're going to believe accordingly. Today we're going to be dealing with an ancient enemy of the cross and an ancient enemy of the truth called Islam. And in particular, we're going to be dealing with its holy book, the Quran. I'm not going to teach you a college course, but I'm going to take a few minutes and I'm going to give you a piece of information that is going to be a bullet in the gun. It's going to be a weapon in the arsenal in your bag of tricks as you're evangelizing Muslims. Or if you have a relative or a friend or a loved one who's considering the claims of Islam and they're flirting with it, and no matter how much love and how much conversation you give them, they fall deeper into this garbage and they become more unreasonable and irrational. And you're like, how can I reach them? I don't have anything to say. On Sunday morning, my pastors never touched the issue, so I don't have the education necessary to be useful to God in this situation. Well, that's why this show exists. That's why Sovereign Grace Institute of Apologetics exists. For those of you who've been my day one Bible students, you're going back to the 1990s when it was 612 Christian Ministries, then when it was Resurrection Christian Ministries, just hearing those words, some of you, that your minds flood with the times that we hit the streets trying to evangelize Minneapolis, and we realized very quickly that there was an Islamic invasion taking place, and we needed to reach out and have people consider the claims of God the Son. And as I went looking for the Bible tracts that would do this, specifically surgically targeted at people who were trapped in Islam, I realized that the right kind of Bible tracts didn't exist yet, which meant I had to write them. A 20-something-year-old kid. Necessity is the mother of invention, and I had to step up my game. So some of you remember Quranic Chaos in the 1990s. I wrote that. The other one that I wrote was Exodus from Mecca. Exodus from Mecca got me put on the Hamas death list in 1999. Some of you know those stories. They've yet showed up at my house where I lived as a single father with my daughter. And some of you have seen the police reports on that one. But preaching the gospel is not a place for cowards. And even though I was a young man and I was being targeted, it did not stop me from going forward because I thought about what Christ went through on the cross for me and what 2,000 years of Christians have went through in order to give me the freedom to be able to consider Jesus and to carry his message. So they never shut my mouth. If Muslims raised their voice to try to silence me, and I said, okay, I'll stay silent because I don't want you to hurt me, then they win. Then the kingdom of Satan wins. So I was never going to let that happen, and I didn't care what happened to me. I raised my daughter in a way where she was down with it. But we're still alive. The church militant, the church triumphant, the church expectant, and I'm still sitting right here. I am the student of Robert Morey. Robert Morey, who wrote Islamic Invasion, who wrote Winning the War Against Radical Islam. He himself was the student of Walter Martin, who, if you know anything about the counter-cult evangelism in the 1960s, the 1970s, the 1980s, where the church began providing Christian responses to such people as the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Oneness Pentecostals, the Seventh-day Adventists, the Mormons, things of that nature. That's the man that did all of it. So whether I'm the spiritual grandson of Walter Martin or the spiritual son of Robert Morey, the point is in terms of that lineage and that heritage, I'm cut from that fabric, and I'm pretty proud that that's what God has done. And so I'm doing the same things in the 2020s that Walter Martin and Robert Morey would be doing if they were alive to see what's going on. So I'm going to provide you a piece of information that's going to be helpful as you try to reach out to Muslims. Quick note, there's a difference between talking to a Muslim from the street and talking to a Muslim that's been to college and learned some things. Ahmed, who works at the falafel place, who serves you a Slurpee, when you start giving him facts of history and criticisms, they'll want to fight, okay? Because you're giving him things he's never heard before, and the logic is, I've never heard it, therefore it can't possibly be true. Well, that's stupid, unless you've heard every single thing. But the guy that's been to college, he's looked at some of these things already. He says, yeah, I admit, okay, we have this problem, Allah has this problem, Muhammad has this problem, the Quran, the Hadith, they have these problems, but I have to remain in it because it's the religion of my family. Kind of like a dude who stays a Catholic by name, because even though Catholicism has been destroyed in front of him because grandma was a Catholic, and why not, right? So there's a difference in who you're sharing the information with, but the good news is the information will survive, and it's verifiable with a half an hour trip to your local library. Nowadays, the kids say, I did my research, I Googled some stuff. Let me tell you something about Google. Google is not an educational source. Google is a corporation. And it's a corporation that's it's paid to lie to you. It exists to lie to you. So if I want to research Joe Schmo, and I type in Joe Schmo and Google him, the number of sources that come up to educate you about Joe Schmo, who controlled what options are put in front of you, and who controlled what options were censored from you and kept from you? The corporation. And ultimately it's engineered inside of this fixed, predetermined system where your ultimate opinion of Joe Schmo is going to be controlled, but you're going to think you researched it. It's stupid. It's like a mouse in a maze looking for a piece of cheese. The whole maze has been controlled by someone else, and you're going to arrive at the cheese that they want. You have to go to a library and read actual books. Put down the marijuana joint and pick up a book. All right? Put down the video game controller and pick up a book. Put down your cell phone and pick up a book while you still have the chance. There's going to come a day where it's going to be illegal to research this stuff, where it's going to be illegal to talk about this stuff, where the Christian church will go underground. I'm starting to see hints of it right now, and I've been talking about it for 30 years. The difference is I sounded crazy back then. I still sound crazy now, but at least you can see a little bit of what I was saying. But anyways, let's talk about the Quran. I'm already 8 minutes in and I haven't said crap, but at least I've given you a little, primer or pre-funk or whatever you want to call it. So, okay, Muhammad dies in the 7th century, all right? There is debate now, and this is a new debate, and I don't get into it too much. There are some people that don't think Muhammad existed as a historical figure, that he was created. The evidence they have is that the Hadith, Sahih al-Bukhari and al-Muslim, which are the most reliable, the earliest manuscripts of his life and times don't even show up until 300-400 years after he was already dead, right? So, therefore, maybe he didn't exist. They had to create some kind of religion to unite the Arabian Empire, and they threw this piece of garbage together. It does make sense because you see how sloppy and the Quran is, but no. I believe Muhammad was a historical figure, and I believe he stood before Jesus and bowed the knee and confessed with the tongue that Jesus Christ is Yahweh and Messiah to the glory of God the Father. But for Muhammad, it's too late. He's on fire for Jesus. Anyway, so Muhammad dies around 600-ish or so. In the wake of his death, okay, there are people compiling the accounts of his recitation. So you've got the Quran being preached. All right, sometimes it was written by scribes. He would have an epileptic seizure and receive revelation right there. And so they had to write it on whatever was clever. The skin of an animal, the leaves, whatever, right? So they gathered all these things together. They existed in all these variant places. And people were preaching what they remembered him to be saying all throughout the post-Muhammad Mecca. Eventually, or the post-Muhammad Arabia, okay? A man comes onto the scene. In English, we say it's the Caliph, Caliph Uthman. I'm writing this down so you can research this. You're going to go through the history books and you're going to see that these things happen. You're going to say, woo, I've got to make a choice. So the Quran's preached, thousands and thousands of surahs. Caliph Uthman shows up. Okay, the Arabian empire is spreading. It's spreading out through Syria. It's spreading into North Africa. And when you're conquering new places, the people that you conquer, to make them more obedient and submissive, you have to have a propaganda campaign. It's the old that fills their mind and their heart and their soul with, it would be a great idea to submit to being conquered by a dictator. How do you fill people's heads with that? You got to have a propaganda, and often a religious worldview that teaches them they're being obedient to God by being obedient to the dictator is the way to go. So he knew that Islam was going to have to be it. The word Islam literally means submission. It's a military term. It means I've been conquered. So it's perfect. It's military/spiritual. Bow down to Allah, bow down to the dictator, or he's going to slit your throat. But here's the deal. Thousands and thousands of surahs was going to make for a real mess. Caliph Uthman said, we've got to standardize Al-Quran, or the recitation, into some kind of format that everybody agrees on. So he gets Abu Bakr, or Abu Bakr, however you want to pronounce it, and they have a council in which they create the standardized text of the Quran, okay? So you have all these. Caliph Uthman says we have to standardize it. You have the standardized text. Now, it had to meet his approval, and 25% of the Quran was removed or left out for political reasons. Like the people might be motivated, I need to be free of a dictator, or something like that. Anything that threatened the Arabian rulership and empire had to go. So he got rid of these things. He did not approve it. This is the Uthman Quran. But what about these? He ordered all of them to be burned. Okay? All of them are burned, and this was presented to the world as the Quran. This is the one that went across the world. The raiders, the Muslim people, robbing, looting, raping, burning, destroying in the name of Allah, with this in their minds. Okay? Question. No matter how good Caliph Uthman's military is, no matter how dedicated, do you think that they were able to get every single one of these and burn all of them? Or were there a few in a nook and a cranny somewhere that someone held on to for dear life that survived? Well, eventually you get to the 1900s, where archaeology is systematized as a science, and behold, this version of the Quran becomes known. Okay? Now, Ahmed, who lives down the street from you, or the local imam at the Islamic Center at the mosque in your neighborhood, reads this. The whole Islamic world, 2 billion people read this on the planet. To them, this is the word of Allah. But this is the edited version. Now, this is on the scene, and people are starting to wake up. So you're faced with a crisis. You see the crisis, don't you? Do I stay loyal to this for emotional reasons, or because someone told me to? Or do I realize, hey, there's other stuff here? Then, or do you say, hey, the supposed God that I've submitted my life to, that I bow down to 5 times a day, is so inept and so weak that he could not preserve his word? You see what I'm saying? And can I really trust a religion that did this to me? And so this is one of the reasons that Muslims are leaving by the droves right now. You have the Caliph Uthman experience, where he burned 25% of the Quran for political reasons, and the one that survived is the one they're reading today. If you're a Muslim seeing this, Look this up. A good commentary, even by the universities of Mecca and Medina, if it's written by the right scholar, will admit this. Yes, Uthman standardized it. They'll try to clean up the words or whatever and say he was trying to do a good thing or whatever. But yes, 25% of the text in variant readings was destroyed by him, and he didn't get all of them, and some of them are being discovered right now. Some of them have been discovered in the last 100 years, last 50 years, and it's shaking up the world, okay? So if you're evangelizing the Muslim community and they say the Quran is the word of Allah, it's about as reliable as the New York Times. Not even so, because the text they're looking at existed in variant readings. And what are you going to do? They think it has been perfect. It was written by Allah in heaven and sent. It was recited to Jibril, and Jibril recited it to Muhammad, and Muhammad recited it to the scribes, and scribes wrote it down. There's problems. Do you see what I'm saying? So there you go. Run, tell it. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. The Quran that you know today, that you trust, when the rubber hits the road, it's an edited version. What are you going to do? I recommend abandoning Allah, abandoning Muhammad, abandoning the Quran, abandoning the Hadith, and coming to Jesus Christ, not Prophet Isa, peace be upon him, but God, the Son of the second Psalm. God, the Son of Proverbs, chapter 30, verse 4. God, the Son, promised in the book of Isaiah in chapters 7 and 9. There's a person called God, the Son, and in the historical figure of Jesus of Nazareth, he walked the earth. He lived the life that you could never live, died the death you deserve to die, and he rose again, and you will stand before him. And that should scare you. But you should want to stand before him judicially not guilty, innocent, in the courtroom of God. Only Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection can do that. If this was done in love, and I hope that you learned something from it, Caliph Uthman standardized the Quran, and before he did that, there were thousands and thousands of surahs that have been destroyed, but we have now discovered some of them that have survived the attempt to destroy them because he couldn't destroy them all. What are you going to do? The Bible doesn't have a Caliph Uthman moment. We don't have someone try to burn all the copies of Isaiah, and then there's a fake one that we're looking at, and now we've discovered the real one. We don't have that problem. But Muslims, you have a real problem. I say get rid of it. All right? I'll talk to you soon. God bless and keep you. Thank you for tuning in to Brian James Shanley Raw. What will you do with Jesus? Neutral you cannot be. For one day you will be asking, what's Jesus going to do with me?